Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, The 7 Greatest Mistakes Trainers Make and How to Avoid Them, hosted by HRDQ-U and presented by Bob Pike. My name is Sarah, and I will moderate today's webinar. It'll last about an hour. So if you have any questions, you're going to want to type them into the questions chat area that's on your GoToWebinar control panel. You'll also notice there's a handout section there. You can open and print out those handouts as well. So take a look at your control panel and find the questions chat area. You can submit any questions during the session and we'll be able to answer those, and then look for your handouts as well. Our presenter today is Bob Pike. He is known globally as the trainer's trainer. Bob has written more than 30 books and created a dozen videoed systems on designing and delivering training. His Master Trainer's Handbook is the best-selling Train the Trainer book ever published, with more than 333,000 copies in print in 4 editions. He has designed more than 600 training programs of 1 day or longer since 1969. He's presented at every ATD International Conference and Exposition since 1977 and is a regular keynote at global training and performance conferences. He has worked with more than 25 countries during his career, and his works have been translated into Korean, Chinese, Japanese, and Spanish. It is truly an honor to have you speaking with us today, Bob.
Well, thank you, and it's good to be back, and I appreciate HRDQ and all of the contributions that your organization has made over the years to the training community as well. So good morning and welcome to everybody. I say good morning because it's still morning here in Tempe, Arizona, which is where I am at the moment, and I'm glad that you've joined me. I hope everybody downloaded the handout. It's going to be kind of critical to what we're doing. And I want to start by asking you a question, and here's the question. If somebody were to say to you, what is training, what would you say? If somebody were to ask you, what is training, what would you say? And just type in the chat box your response to that. What is training? Okay, knowledge transfer, instructing, lots of good responses here. Change of behavior, it's education. Okay, great. I think all of those are great, and let me just give you another piece. For me, when I look at the 7 greatest mistakes in training, you'll notice up at the top, it says mistake number 1 is no transfer strategy, and the solution is focus and clarity. And so focus is what are we paying attention to, and clarity is how well do we understand it. And so when I think of training, what I want to focus on is that training is a process. It is not an event, which means that it begins long before the training ever takes place, and it continues until we see results on the job, and that's critical. And so the focus of training, or the purpose of training, is to produce results. Okay, and to me that's critical. It's not butts and seats, it's not how many hours, it's not even the knowledge or skills that people have developed. It's whether or not that ever gets used to produce results for the organization. I mean, that's why organizations are doing training. We're doing training because we want to produce a result for the organization. And to produce results, you need a transfer strategy. And to me, there are 2 things that are missing in almost every instructional systems design model that I've ever looked at. And most of you are most familiar with the ADDIE model, and some of you are also familiar with the SAM model. Those are the 2 big ones. And the interesting thing is that both of those models focus on what are we delivering, and it's all focused on the content. And I never see built into a design the transfer strategy. It's all about how are we going to deliver this content. So we need a transfer strategy. And so the question is, how do you develop a transfer strategy? And so two colleagues of mine, John Newstrom and Mary Broad, developed this grid that you're seeing, the transfer of training grid. And what they discovered is that there are three people that really have an impact on whether or not training ever gets used. The manager who is sending people, the participant who's attending, and the trainer who's doing the design and the delivery. And you'll notice that on the grid that there are three moments of truth, if you will. So the manager can do things before the training even takes place to help ensure that the participants learn and use what they've learned. Or they can do things that actually preclude the possibility that they will ever apply anything. And the same thing, managers, participant trainers can do things during the training and then finally after the training. So you'll see that there are 9 moments of truth, and I've numbered the boxes 1 through 9. And so here's my question to you. Which of these, and so just type your answer in the chat box, which of the 9 moments of truth, so out of all of these, and I'm going to show the research from 95 Fortune 500 companies, but of these, which one do you think has the greatest impact on whether or not training? So just type in your response, A through I. Which one, if you had to choose only one? So go ahead and type in your responses, and I'll give you a minute to do that. And Sarah, maybe you could read some of the letters aloud as they come in.
Sure, yeah, we have a lot of participation today. It's just great. It looks like the majority are coming in with G, letter G, manager after. But we're also seeing trainer before is another really popular choice here.
Okay. Great. Well, I wanted you to think that through that. And again, think about focus and clarity, and I'm going to actually give you the rationale for this. Now, understand that all of these are important, but there are some that have a greater impact, and hopefully after I explain, you'll understand why I'm saying that. So let's go back. Number 1 in our research for 95 Fortune 500 companies is the manager before. So think about it. Let's say that I go, okay, Sarah, I've been told I got to send you this. So go ahead and go. Understand we're short-staffed. Nobody's covering your job while you're gone. Your projects are still due. I don't know how you're going to use any of this garbage anyway, but go. So now, before Sarah has even showed up in class, have I impacted, as her manager, her motivation to learn, her desire to learn? And the answer is, of course. But what if, on the other hand, I say, Sarah, I managed to get you a slot in this class, and I really had to call in some favors to get it, but you're important to our department. I think this class is important to your future. I've talked with the instructor. There are 5 key things that you're going to be able to learn, skills that you're going to be able to develop. But from the standpoint of the department, here are the 2 that I think are really important. And I'd like to set up a time next Wednesday afternoon, 2 o'clock, when you and I can meet after the class is over. I want to, the instructor said you'll be developing an action plan. I want to look at your action plan with you, look at how we support you over the next 30 to 60 days to make sure that you really are able to use what you've learned. You know, can you see a difference between those 2? And of course, the answer is yes. So before the training even starts now, but the question is, how many of us have ever had managers that did that? And most managers never had anybody ever prepare them for training. So this is something that's missing, because I don't think that as a part of our training design, we're saying, okay, how can managers have conversations with their trainers? So that's number 1. Number 2, is the trainer before, because the trainer is the one that can actually coach managers on how to have that conversation. The trainer can include managers in the design process so that they feel ownership of the content, the knowledge and skills that are going to be delivered to their participants. The managers now see that this actually helps solve a problem that's going to improve performance of their work team and help them to achieve their key results. And those things are critical. So that's why the trainer before is number 2. Then number 3 is the manager after, which a lot of you chose. Does the manager actually create an environment where people can apply the knowledge and use the skills that they've learned? Or does the manager say, look, I don't care what you learned at that class. Let me show you, here's how it works in the real world. This is what I'm expecting. And again, crush any transfers. So that's number 3. Number 4 is a trainer during. Am I what I call instructor-led but participant-centered? So am I giving people a chance to actually practice the skills, reflect on what they've learned, develop action plans, do all of those kinds of things? Now you might go, whoa, Bob, slow down. You're feeding me with a fire hose. Well, yes, I am, because we have only 60 minutes, but that's also why this is being recorded, and so you can listen to it again so that you can apply more and more of these kinds of things. As with anything else, we want you to get results from this program, not just gain some knowledge. Number 5 is the participant during. So notice that what we've done with the first 4 is we've created a maximum environment for the participants that makes it likely that all participants are going to learn. All participants are going to gather new knowledge and gain new skills that they can apply. Then number 6 is the participant after. Do they implement their action plan? Do they apply the knowledge and the skills on the job? Number 7 is the participant before. Do they minimize the likelihood of disruption by doing a smooth handover of anything they've got in progress with their coworkers so they're not likely to get pulled out of class? Do they do any pre-work that's needed so that when they come to class, everything's prepared? Then number 8, the manager during. Does the manager minimize disruptions so that people aren't getting pulled out of class, missing things because the manager needs them for something or another? And if all of those things happen, then number 9, the trainer after is relatively easy. So again, all of these are important. And actually, in working with my clients, we've actually developed 155 strategies, how-tos, that fall into these 9 boxes. But for our purpose today, I want us to focus on just 3, 1 each for the manager before, the trainer before, and the manager and after, since they're the biggest 3. And and by the way, I'm going to give you a bonus for just having been here, and I'll tell you more about it later. But it's my book, Unlock Learning and Unleash Performance, that we actually drill down on these things. So right at the end, I'll be showing you how to get this and one other bonus handout absolutely free, just because you took the time to be on this webinar. So again, we're still at mistake number 1, no transfer strategy. So here are 3, and if you've got your handout, you can fill in the blanks. So for the manager before, the manager can meet with participants and develop learning goals for attendance so that when the participant goes in, they know why they're there. They're not walking into class and going, well, I was sent. I need to get 40 hours of training per year, and this is why the manager sent me. Then number 2, for the trainer, brief the manager on the goals of the course and maybe coach them on how to have a conversation with each participant that they're sending. And then number 3, the manager after. The manager provide time for participants to apply the new knowledge and skills, the practice time. Okay, so that's mistake number 1. Mistake number 2, too much content, too little time. And for my entire career, this has been a challenge. You know, if you as a trainer say it's going to take 3 days for people to gain these skills and knowledge, managers are going to be, can you do it in 2? And if you could do it in 2, they'd want it in 1. If you could do it in 1, they'd say, can't you do it in a day? If you could do it in a day, it'd be a half day. And then finally they'd say, look, don't you have a pill that they could take a couple of times a day, and then they don't have to go to class at all? So what I find is we need to apply the minimalist set principle. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Pareto principle, but it's the 80-20 rule. And it was originally developed by an Italian economist named Pareto, who basically discovered that 80% of the value, for example, in a company is in 20% of its assets. And then we found that 80% of our sales are made at 20% of our customers, and 80% of our problems come from 20% of our customers. And it goes on and on. So what I teach my clients to do is what I call applying the minimalist set principle, and say, look, let's divide all of our content. So if you've got a 1-day program, what I'd suggest you do when you get off of this webinar is look at it, and you're going to divide it into 3 buckets. The need to know, nice to know, and where to go. So what's the critical content? So for example, I have a 2-day program called results-based creative learning strategies. And the need to know is about 65 pages of the workbook, and it's printed in white. The nice to know is reference and resource we may draw on during the course, and that's about 25 pages, and it's printed in a light purple. That's the second section. And then the where to go, reference and resources to use after the course is over. We print that up on yellow, so you look it up in the yellow pages. But we want to divide all of our content into those 3 buckets, and I think you'd find that your need to know bucket becomes much, much smaller. We're not trying to cover everything. Does that make sense? Okay. Say yes to yourself, even if you're by yourself. Then mistake number 3, the content chunks are too long. And the solution is to apply the 90-28 rule. So we know from research that the average adult can listen with understanding for 90 minutes, and that's what the U stands for. But they only listen with retention for 20 minutes. And we need to involve them every 8 minutes. And then what I want you to do is right after that 8, I want you to put a parentheses and write the number 4. Because if you're doing webinars like this one, we want to involve them every 4 minutes. So the 90 and 20 comes from Tony Buzan, and the 8 comes from television. No commercial television program, at least in the United States, and actually in many of the countries that I've worked in around the world, go more than 8 minutes without breaking for a commercial. And here in the United States, the average high school student on graduating has been in class 14,000 hours, but has watched television for 19,000 hours. So you have an adult learner in your classroom that has been subjected to a medium that never makes them focus for more than 8 minutes. And so we are chunking our content down into smaller chunks. And with my clients, when I first look at their material, their average content chunk is 45 to 60 minutes. So there's a big disconnect, because you may be delivering the content, but your participants are no longer capable of retaining it. They can still understand it, but they can't retain it. Okay, so we want to chunk our content into smaller and smaller chunks. Then mistake number 4, poor use of evaluation form. And I've got to tell you that in all of the classes I've evaluated for my clients, probably 95% of the time, the last thing that is covered in a class is the evaluation form. And then actually it should be the first thing. So hand it out early, collect it early. Why? Because I hand it out in the first hour of a multiple day class, and I have people go through it so that they understand, here's what we're wanting you to evaluate. And it actually becomes a performance appraisal form. You're going to be appraising my performance, but you're also going to be appraising your performance. And for a lot of people, that is really kind of a shocker. And we evaluate 4 things on our forms: the instructor, the content and the process, the materials and the environment, and also participants. Did the participants show up? Did the participants do their job? And let me ask, how many of these things are you currently evaluating in your evaluation form? So just put down the number 1, 2, 3, or 4. So are you evaluating one of these things that I've suggested, 2 of them, 3 of them, 4 of them? Type them in the chat box. And again, Sarah, if you could give us a little feedback on what's coming in. So so number 1 to 4, we're evaluating 1, we're evaluating 2, 3, or we're actually doing all 4. And I'd really be surprised if there are many doing participant engagement, unless you've been to one of my training programs before.
Yeah, the majority are coming in with 2, 3. I would say 3 looks like the most that are coming in. We do have, though, you know, a good handful here who are saying we use all 1, 2, 4, and are saying all of them. But yes, most of them are coming in 1, 2, and 3.
Okay, great. And let me ask you, do we have the ability to send out a handout to people after the session is over?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so if you're interested, and you can just put yes in the chat box if you're interested, I'd be happy to give Sarah a copy of one of my evaluation forms so that you could use it maybe as a model for improving your evaluation form. So if enough of you say yes in the chat box, then we'll just do that by way of follow-up, and I'm happy to do that. But the biggest thing that I would say to you is give out the form early, because then people can be working on it. Because, for example, we're 23 minutes into this webinar. You've already decided, does Bob know what he's talking about, or doesn't he? Is this a good content or process? Was a handout useful? You've already decided all of these things. Now, we might go up or down a little in the next 40 minutes, but you've already decided that. So why not give the form out early? And besides, now people are put on notice, whoa, I'm going to be asked about, did I do my job? You know, because for years in academia, the only grade that has ever been given is me grading my students. And yet when we get into the world of work, and the only one being given a grade is the instructor, you know, we stop asking, did the students do their job? And we need to start asking that again, because we all know that a difficult participant can really make or break a class by their behavior unless the instructor knows how to manage it, but that's probably a topic for another time. So mistake number, okay, here's a test question. The purpose of training. So just in the chat box, type, I'm gonna give you a little mid-course test. 1, 2, 3, 4, you can only choose one answer. What is the purpose of training? And so just type in your answer, and give them about 15 seconds, and then you can start reading aloud some of the answers, Sarah.
So far, 3 is coming in as the most popular answer. We've got some 4s that are coming in as well. I haven't seen any 2s yet.
Okay. All right. And if you remember right at the beginning of the class, I said the purpose of training is a process, not an event, and its purpose is to get results. So if you said 3, big smiley face, you're right. And by the way, this was an example of a revisit, which we'll cover in a couple of minutes, rather than a review. It's not me going over it again. It's me giving you an opportunity to process it and to think about it. Okay, so mistake number 5, improper handling of questions. So here's the 2 things that I see happening. We're coming up to break, and the trainer says, now before we go on break, are there any questions? Who is going to be the person who keeps the rest of us from going on break? So even though there might be some questions, people are looking around and their peers are going, there better not be any questions. And so there aren't any. Or maybe people come back from break, which is a better time to do it, and you say, are there any questions? And about 85% of the time, you get none. The other 15%, and only those of you that are older than 50 will remember this reference, but I'll use it anyway just as a nod to those of us that are over 50, or some of you that have watched Welcome Back, Kotter on classic TV. But Kotter was a teacher who had a student called Horshack, and every time Kotter asked a question, there'd be Horshack going, ooh, ooh, ooh. And the rest of the class would be going, oh, not him again, not him again. And I think all of us at some time or another had a Horshack in our class where no matter what, their hand goes up and people are going either one or 2 things. This is now going to be a long monologue that might have a question at the end of it, or it's just going to be a question that has no value to the rest of us. So what I did is I got rid of that possibility and say, okay, take 2 minutes now, get a partner or at your table, come up with 2 questions you'd like to ask me about anything that we have covered so far. And after 2 minutes, I'll say, okay, now go ahead and we'll take 10 minutes for Q&A, and we go through that, and now we get a better question, and people have had a chance to think about their questions. And I'll show you a modified way of doing that even within this webinar in just a couple of minutes. And then secondly, allow a specific amount of time, because you'll have some people say, you know, if we ask enough questions, we can run this out of time and he won't cover any more content and we can kind of relax. So let's just keep him busy with questions. Okay, so, and then capture the question board. So when time is up, I'll say, okay, so over here we have a flip chart, and on the flip chart there's a big question mark. And so if you've got any pressing questions that we didn't get to, go ahead and take one of your post-it notes on your table, write the question on it, put it up on the capture the question board. I'll go over and I'll scan in and continue to answer those questions. And so I use a capture the question board because people don't have to ask the question and then I tell them wrong time, put it in the parking lot. So there's a big difference between the capture the question board and putting it in a parking lot. Okay, so number 6 is no use of C.O.R.E. And so C.O.R.E. is a concept that I developed a number of years ago when I was developing creative training techniques, which I now call creative learning strategies. And that's that there are 4 things that have to be built into every training program: closers, openers, revisitors, and energizers. Most trainers don't close, they just run out of time. Whoop, that's all we have time for. Thanks for coming. Please be sure to fill out your evaluation form. They don't open, they start dumping content. They review, which means they're covering it again, they don't revisit. And they don't know how to get energy back up when energy drops, and it will 2 or 3 times during an average class. So let me just give you some quick tips. So the closing act, a good close does 3 things. It allows for action planning, for people to stop and think about, what am I learning? How am I going to use it? It allows for celebration, so that they feel good about what they've learned. And it also ties things together. Okay, so that's the closing act, and I'll actually show you one method that I use right at the end of this presentation. So we will model closing. Then opening, we raise the bar, BAR. A good opener will break preoccupation through involvement. You can ignore an instructor, but it's difficult to ignore participants who have a task that they're trying to accomplish. It also allows for networking. When tension goes up, retention goes down. And so people walk into class and they're wondering, am I going to be embarrassed? Am I going to know as much about other people? Am I going to be able to contribute? And so when we actually allow them to connect with participants, the tension goes down because they realize I belong and I'm going to be able to contribute. And then we also, and this is the big difference between an opener and an icebreaker, we always want it to be relevant to the content. We want it to be relevant to the content. And so we've closed closers, openers, now revisitors. We want to revisit, not review. So again, revisit is when participants are given a chance to think about the content again. And review is when the instructor goes over it again. So let me just give you a quick idea about revisit. So we've covered 6.5 of the 7 points. So what I'd like you to do right now, and then I'm going to show you another variation in a little bit, is to just take 90 seconds to reflect. And I want you to type in the chat box one thing you're going to do, one idea you're going to use from this session. So just type in the chat box. So reflect on the session. Of all the things we've covered, what's one thing that you're going to use? And just type it in the chat box. And again, Sarah, if you would give it about 30 seconds and then just start reading aloud some of the responses, that would be great.
Okay, we have a lot coming in, so my screen is scrolling pretty quickly here, but I'm going to try and summarize as best I can. I can already see we have a lot coming in that are saying the 90-28.
Okay, great.
C.O.R.E is coming up a lot. Develop a transfer strategy. Use of the matrix of roles. So that matrix that you showed early on.
Right, so transfer strategy again.
Mm-hmm. Allow for networking, reduce the tension. Hand out the evaluation form early. We have a couple here saying too much content, too little time.
Okay, yep, so chunk it down.
Yep, and apply the minimalist set principle. Better use of asking questions before break. And a lot are saying small groups, working in small groups, applying questions with the small group setting.
Okay, great. So now what I want you to notice is we just did a revisit because as you were typing in your action idea, and now Sarah's giving you all the other action ideas, you're really taking time right now to reflect on all the content that's been covered in this course. And one of the things, Sarah, I think it's possible, can we do a cut and paste on this particular thing, their action ideas, and also give it to them after the session is over so they have a list of all the action ideas?
Yes, absolutely. We can email that out.
Okay, so that's another thing that we'll do for you, because then you've got everybody's action ideas, and that'll stimulate you to maybe come up with the 2 or 3 that you most want to use. And actually what we've also modeled for you just now is an energizer. So these are quick 1 to 2 minutes, content related. And so what I did is I paused and I gave you reflection time. And now you're typing, you're hearing other people's ideas, It's a change of pace that gets the energy back up. And we want to be constantly doing that as well. And so now, actually, what I want to do is we're going to take about 6 minutes for Q&A. But so what I want you to do is I want you to think of one question you'd like to ask me about any of the content and type that in the chat box. And I'm going to give you about a minute to do that. And then Sarah will look for multiple questions that are the same so that we answer the questions that are of highest value to you. And we'll answer about 3 of them in 6 minutes. So go ahead. If you've got a question, now would be the time to put it in the chat box. We'll take about a minute for that, and then we'll take about 5 minutes for Q&A.
Bob, I have 2 people send in the same question actually early on today when you were talking about evaluations. So I'm going to actually just start with that. Because
Okay.
I know we do this here as well, and so I'm curious for your answer. But they're asking, what about evaluations that are done online, which is usually sent out after the course?
Okay. So I think online evaluations are really good, but I would want to give them an evaluation in class. So even if we're going to do it online, I want them looking at it at the beginning of class, because I want to set this up not just as an evaluation, I want to set it up as a performance appraisal. And you can't do a performance appraisal unless you set the standards before the class. And so for me, that's really the key. Are we setting the standards before the class so that people know what we're asking for feedback on, even if that feedback is done electronically after class? So I have no objection to the electronic. I just want them to know what the standards are and what the feedback we're looking for before the class starts. And I would also say this: if I'm doing a multiple day class, I don't want to wait until the class is over and everybody's left to get feedback. So if I've got a 1-day class, I might stop at the end of day 1, give everybody a 3x5 card, or give each small group a flip chart and say, okay, on your flip chart, I want you to write start, stop, continue. What's one thing you want me to start doing tomorrow that would help the class be more effective? What's one thing we should stop doing that would help the class be more effective? And then what are some things that we should continue doing? You found it effective today. You want to make sure we keep doing it as the class goes on. So I'm going to get some intermediate feedback and not just wait till the course is over and everybody's gone to get feedback. Okay, so Sarah, what's another question?
We have a few people who are asking about manager involvement. So how do you prep managers before a class? How do you get supervisors engaged who don't see much value in a specific training?
Okay, well, I would say that, so there's really 2 parts to this. So let's look at the supervisors that don't see the value. So, managers will pay attention to things that to either gain pleasure or avoid pain, and they will do more to get rid of pain than they will to gain pleasure. And so I would say that if managers aren't seeing the value, then it's because they haven't been part of the process. And so that's one reason why I want to involve managers as we're developing courses, so that they see that this course is being developed in response to on-the-job performance issues, so that people are actually going to be more effective. You're going to hit more of your department's goals because people have this skill and this new knowledge. And so I think that that's a communications issue of we're not getting them involved before. And so that's one part of it. The second part is, once managers are getting ready to send people, I think we need to look at the process of how are they doing that. And so part of the process of signing somebody up for a course should also be maybe a little checklist where the manager goes through it with the participant and says, you know, here's the course, and let's mark down here why you're going to the course. Here are the skills and knowledge that we want you to focus on, et cetera, so that the manager has the talking points that make it easy to sit down with an employee and prepare them to go rather than just send them. One of the gifts that I'm giving you today is actually my performance solutions cube, and I say when performance is the question, training is the sixth answer, and it'll actually kind of take you through some things that you can use as a part of that. Okay, I think we've got time for 2 more questions. So next question, Sarah.
Sure. We have people asking around heavy content or a lot of content in a short amount of time. Todd, for example, here I think asks the question really well. When the time allotted to the delivery is short, yet the content delivery is heavy, how do you make sure that learning is transferring? He said he finds himself telling versus self-discovery more often.
Okay, well, one of the things that I would say is that just because I have a short period of time, you know, so like, for example, I have an hour today, but I'm still engaging you every 8 minutes. And it's interesting that people will say, well, we have to lecture because we have too much to cover, as though they can help people learn more, because remember, the focus is on results. The true test isn't, did you cover all of this? It's what are people doing differently? And so I would say that on average, when I work with a client to look at a class that they're delivering, so for example, I had a bank that was doing a 5-week onboarding for their tellers. And there were a lot of issues that we were looking at, teller turnover, et cetera. But using my instructor-led participant-centered processes, we actually condensed that 5 weeks to 3 weeks without leaving any content out. And I've got to tell you that it was strongly lecture-based when we first started looking at it. So it's not that involvement takes more time. Involvement can actually take less time because you see much more quickly that, wow, participants have it, so we can move on. And so I think it's a false assumption that if I've got a lot of content, it forces me to lecture. I would actually say if you've got a lot of content, it forces you to involvement, because involvement helps people to get the content that much more quickly. And we really need to focus on what's the difference in behavior that we want to see on the job after, and what's the results that we want to see 60 and 90 days after the class is over. And that becomes the key consideration. Okay, and one more question, Sarah.
Sure. We have several people who are asking for your favorite physical energizer.
Well, it depends on whether we're talking about online or whether we're talking about face-to-face. So if it were face-to-face, one of the things that I do during a class is I develop a lot of flip charts. Flip charts are my favorite visual aid. And so actually, even by the afternoon of the first day of a class, I'll probably have 8 or 9 flip charts that are up on the wall. And so one of the things that I'll do is I'll say to participants, right now, get a partner, go stand by a chart. And so they will, and I'll say, okay, now this is a gallery of art. You know, I have created fabulous art for you to view. And what I want you to do right now is just take 3 minutes and go from chart to chart, and with your partner, talk about what's the meaning of this chart? What did we learn when Bob was creating this? And so in 2 or 3 minutes, they go around the room, they visit 9 or 10 charts, including maybe some of their own charts. And so they've re-looked at content, and it's physically energized them because they've been moving. And then I say, thank the partner you're with, and return to your seats, and then we're done. So that would be an example of a quick physical energizer. So, all good questions. I really appreciate them. And so we have actually modeled for you a method of doing Q&A where we've set a time limit, and we've given people reflection time. And then, of course, I've taken advantage of Sarah, and she said moderator, but I want to tell you that Sarah's job is really producer. She has solved a lot of behind-the-scenes problems that people aren't even aware of. So it's not just her keeping track of things that are going on while the class is happening. It's a lot of problem solving and other things being done in the background. And so I want to just tell Sarah how much I appreciate her support as a producer of this hour, not just as a moderator. Okay, so now we're on to number 7. And number 7, and this is really more face-to-face, is not available participants. And my goal is 15-15. So if I'm doing a face-to-face training, my goal is to spend the first 15 minutes before the class, or the last 15 minutes before the class, being able to interact with participants. So my equipment is set up, it's tested, everything is ready to go. And so I'm not problem solving that last 15 minutes. I'm interacting with you as a participant in that last 15 minutes. And then the other thing is to the first 15 minutes after. So I'm talking about after the first day, the first 15 minutes. I'm not packing up, blasting out of there. I'm interacting with participants if they want to. Now, if they just leave, then I go about my business. But the first 15 minutes before class, first 15 minutes after class really belong to the participants. Now, we've covered a lot of things in this time, and so I want to give you some more time to reflect. So here are some of the key things. And so I want you to just reflect, and what I want you to do is in your chat box, just put the numbers of those things that you plan to use after the course is over. And so just take a minute to do that. So you can type in 1 number, you can type in 8 numbers, you can type in no numbers. But just take a minute to do that. And when you've made your choices, go ahead and let us see that. And Sarah, what you could maybe do is give us a number. So is the average person choosing 4, 6, 8, 2? Give us some idea of what people are choosing.
Sure, yeah, people are choosing multiple. So I would say a few people are choosing just 1. They're choosing a lot. I see a lot of 4, 5, and 6s coming up here as the screen is refreshing.
Okay, great. So again, what I want you to notice is reflection time, giving people a chance to think about what they've learned instead of just continually dumping content on them. Okay, so earlier I talked about a gift, and so I actually have 2 gifts for you. And so all you need to do to get the gift is you send an email to book@cttnewsletters.com, and in the subject line put knowledge, and then just give me a sentence about the most important thing you've learned and how are you going to use it. And what you'll get in response is a link that'll let you download two things. I've written a book called Unlock Learning, Unleash Performance, and you'll get a special ebook version of that drills down on a lot of the things that we've talked about today. And you'll also get a job aid that I put together on the Performance Solutions Cube. When performance is the question, training is the sixth answer. And so you get those two things for free. So this link will be good for about 48 hours. So I would suggest you do it sooner rather than later, because the link is not going to be up forever. And this is actually two of the gifts that I'm giving all of the members of my Training and Performance Forum newsletter. So I want to just mention that. So this is actually my 50th year as a trainer. I started full-time in 1969. I've been doing the Training and Performance newsletter since 1987. Every single month, publishing 10 to 15 pages of short tips, techniques, strategies, ideas, reviews, resources, and people normally pay $10 a month or $120 a year. But what I'm doing for people that are on this webinar is you can get it for $50. So if you go to cttnewsletters.com/join today, you'll see that the $120 has been reduced to $50. And then what I'm also doing is giving subscribers this year, because again, it's kind of like my 50th anniversary gift back to you, is as I'm giving them throughout the year 50 gifts. So two of the gifts I've already given you, that's the Unlock book and the job aid. But I've also got slide deck templates so that you can create very professional looking PowerPoint decks by having backgrounds there. Training activities, music, videos, reports. And so the total value of that is over $1,000 throughout this year. And you get it as a member for just that $50. So let me challenge you to consider joining the newsletter and giving us an ongoing way to stay connected with you throughout the year. And for those of you that are going to be at ATD, this will be my 43rd year presenting, and I've got some special things there. So I want to thank Sarah for the great job that she did today on this webinar, and I know she has one more thing that she wants to cover before we close. And so, Sarah, I'll turn it back to you and say, God bless you all, and it's been a real joy to be with you this morning.
Thank you so much, Bob. We, as always, love working with you. And thank you, everyone, for participating. We had a really wonderful involvement today. So if you still have questions, go ahead and send those over. We'll get answers out to you. So make sure you send those through. I know there's a lot of people on here who are new to HRDQ, so I just want to introduce kind of who we are. We publish soft skills training materials. So check out our website for facilitate workshops that are online or print assessments that come with some classroom training workshops with it as well. We provide up out of your seat learning games, reproducible workshops that you can customize. Our customer service team know our products inside and out, so feel free, give them a call. They'll really help you work with what business issue you might be having and what we may have here to help you. And if you do need some help with either train the trainer or on-site delivery, we also have expert trainers that can help as well. So check out HRDQ, go to Bob's information. We will email you that email address where to get his information so you guys can find that real easily in case you didn't write it down quick enough. It's also in your handouts that you can print as well. So thank you so much, Bob. It has been a pleasure today. And thank you, everyone, for participating on the line. We'll see you at our next webinar.